So, why worldviews commit suicide? Ooh, that's a provocative title for Principle 4 here. And so she starts off with what she's been doing, which is to tell a story of someone who is highlighting the principle that she's talking about. She's talking about this scientist who is a brain surgeon, and so he pretty much came to the realization that that religion, especially Christianity, is congruent with science. So anything that science talks about is going to be right, and anything that religion talks about, that Christianity talks about, is pretty much just moral tales. It's not anything to kind of hang your hat on with what the universe is like, or kind of those bigger questions. So science is what's going to save us in the end. And so he says,
so this guy thought that, science was it, right? And Christianity was just a bunch of tales to help us with our ethics.
Right.
And that live good and that sort of thing.
Right. So, yeah. So this is kind of Dawkins' kind of view of helps with survival, but Darwin and evolution is kind of what reigns supreme here. And so he does say Darwinian evolution, which seems to demonstrate that life could be explained perfectly well by material mechanisms alone. There was no need to invoke God. But when he went on to study things with the brain, he would try and kind of reverse engineer parts of the brain, and so he studied it. These what does he call them? Capillaries, which kind of act as vibration dampeners. And so what he used ultimately, instead of kind of his biology textbooks, were actually in engineering textbooks. Well, that seems odd, but okay, it's a mechanism. You can kind of think of the brain as kind of a computer without thinking that humans are computers. But he says, and what do engineers do? Well, of course, they design things. And so this got him to start thinking that, maybe it's not just random processes that speak for how life became to be and continues on. Maybe with engineering, it may point to design, or at least it operates. So this biological research operates on the presumption of design. For example, a standard procedure in biology is called reverse engineering, and then that's what he essentially tried to do to work out his brain surgery-ness.
By the way, we should say that the person she's referring to is Michael Ignor, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, who eventually became a professor and vice president of neurosurgery at State University of New York in Stony Brook.
Yeah, so a sharp guy.
Yeah.
Philosopher Michael Roos himself, and Darwinist, says biology unavoidably relies on design-type thinking. So if something doesn't work in nature, scientists and doctors and chemists are always saying, well, that's not how it should be, because there's this presumption of design, of order, of structure. So if you're testing a base and it reads as acidic, well, you go, well, the chemical process of the universe, because it's constantly in change, has all of a sudden, evolved, and now we have to rethink about the structure of the universe. They go, well, no, that's what it was like yesterday. That's what we should expect today. However, in a random chance universe with everything in constant flux, why have anything that's ordered or designed or expected? And so biology has this reliance on design type thinking. We treat organisms, the parts at least, as if they were manufactured, as if they were designed, and then try to work out their functions. The philosopher Roos writes, and directed thinking, teleological thinking, is appropriate in biology because, and only because, organisms seems as if they are manufactured and as if they have been created by an intelligence and put to work. And so in the book, she italicizes the as if. Those are big standout points of flashing warnings to hone in on. And so we saw in Principle 3, the phase as if signals cognitive dissonance. So that holding two thoughts at the same time that compete against each other. We saw this. Yeah. 1984 kind of toys it with the doublethink terminology. And so, we're at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia, even though you might think that we weren't, but we are now. And so that's what you're forced to subscribe to, or your entire foundation collapses. And so that's what we want to hone in on. We want to collapse the foundation. So he goes on to Ignor's work. He goes on to say, I was surprised by how little Darwinian paradigm contributed to my work. By contrast, the design paradigm aligned nicely with the most important aspects of my research. When theory and facts contradict one another, which one would he follow? And so we saw this, and we'll see this throughout this chapter 2 of Mitch Stokes' book that we went over, and how hard it is to give up a theory, even though we might see facts kind of go against it. And so all that can be searched for on our YouTube page as well for those short clips. He goes on to say that Darwinian process may explain some patterns in change in gene frequency in populations, of course, but the evidence does not even remotely support the claim that change and necessity fully accounts for the
chance.
Yes, chance and necessity fully account for the appearance of complex design in living things. And so we have people.
So notice what he's doing here is he's positing two potential explanations for what we're looking at here, right? One of them is it happened by chance. The other is it's just necessary. So, for instance, 2 plus 2 is just necessarily 4 because that's just the way things work. or the other explanation is by chance, right? It just happens, right? I flipped a coin, by chance heads came up. So those are two possible explanations for what we observe when we're considering, the universe, the earth, the things that we're trying to explain. Of course, the third one is, not chance or necessity, but it's design, right? It's the engineering of something to cause something. And usually when we think of design, we think of a person. And so, so those are the three main areas with regard to ways to explain things. Yeah. Chance, necessity, or design.
Yeah. There was a video that I posted on our Facebook page for, let's see here. It was May 5th of 2020. It was a three-way interview with David Gletmer, David Berlinski, and Stephen C. Meyer. And their critique of kind of where science should be heading is an overthrow in this kind of Darwinian type thinking, and their conversation is very nuanced. And David Berlinski is a great crotchety old philosopher at this time, and I've always appreciated his openness and his candor with respect to calling out issues within the Darwinian theory. And so the other David has written a book review on Stephen C. Meyer's book, where he says, essentially that these unguided processes at the very beginning of to get us to where we're at are so. And he's a computer expert. He's a kind of not philosophy, but he doesn't just make computers. He's talking about theory of computer technology. He's saying, he's looking at his own work, that it's so infinitesimally impossible that it's almost like, you have your numerator one over whatever chance is. He says that denominator is so outrageously small to even get to, the next like nucleotide, let alone everything, and the pervasive of the Cambrian explosion is insane. And we should be reevaluating things just as we did with Marx and with Freud. And so it's a great little hour interview that I found, and I really enjoyed the talk that they had. Okay, so back to Ignor. He says, "For if there is no God, then no one is." He's saying that in fact, it is much more plausible that atheism, rather than Christianity, is this form of wish fulfillment that Freud warns us about. That religion is this wish fulfillment that can be turned against its own theory. However, it looks like atheism could also just have that same type of charge leveled against it. For there's no God, then no one is watching, then there's no moral accountability, and you can do whatever you want. And so he then
as long as you can get away with it,
right? As long as you don't get arrested, right? Yes. So he goes on to say then that now I see science as another way to appreciate the beauty of God's creation. I bring science into church with me. Truth is unitary, and so that's exactly what we're saying too. That our foundational belief, as Romans 1 tells us, that God exists and that He's the creator and He has certain qualities that are recognized by all creation, and from there we should have things like understanding that there's order in the universe, or we can even backwards walk it like the classical theorists do and say there's order, there's reason, there's intelligibility, there's moral standings, moral absolutes, and that should point to the existence of God. They're not competing with one another. Christianity, the Christian worldview, is saying that they run in parallel with each other because of, we would say reason is how God thinks, math is, how God operates in the world. The fact that there are miracles, the fact that we can see God enter into His creation isn't anything different than you or I entering new code into a computer program to get a different output than what would normally be expected.